Professor Wergel's here. We figured out what JSON was. We found the perfect library to use to import and parse JSON. Now we need to add it to our project. You'll see here I have the JDK, and I put the library right here in my root directory. So it's called jasonsimple.jar. It's right here in my project directory, right here in the root. Once it's there, I can right click and add a jar file. Once I add the jar, you'll want to search for it and put it, make sure it's using a relative path. So when I go to the serialization lecture, you'll see it's right here. When I click on it, it actually selects relative path as default, which is good. Okay, if you see relative path and it does dot dot in the front, forward slash dot dot forward slash, and it has a bunch of other information, then most likely you're doing it wrong. When you import a jar file, make sure it just says the name. That way you know it's right in the root directory, and when the TA is graded, it'll be in the same location. Don't use an absolute path, and don't use a relative path that has other information in front of it. It should just say the jar file. Once it does, click on select. Now you'll see I've included the jar file as my libraries, and now I can use it. Okay, now I can use it. So I want to create serialization methods in this class. So if I scroll down, you'll see I've built this here. So I'm overriding the equals method in the object superclass. I want to know if the two people are equal. Well, I could do that for strings. I could do that for integers. The equals methods work automatically, but it's not going to work for my pre-built class unless I tell it what to do. So when I want to check if a person's equal, you'll see I'll grab the object. I'll try to make sure the object is an instance of person. If it's not, then I'm going to return, which means if that object isn't even of type person, why even check it? Go ahead and return false. And if object is equal to null, go ahead and return false. If it's not null and if it's of type person, go ahead and convert the object and load it into memory. And then check the first name. Is first name null? And is first name equal to the actual name? Okay, if they're null, return false. Otherwise, check. Does first name, which is a string, equals the person that's passed in? If yes, good. If no, return false. Then check the last name. Are they null? Then return false. Are they not equal? Then return false. Then check age. Okay, does the age not equal? If they don't equal, return false. And gender. If all of these pass, if all of these conditions pass, so first name has to equal, last name has to equal, age has to equal, and gender has to equal. If they all equal, then return true. So that's how I compare two people. You'll see here I have two JSON string. So I'll take a JSON object. Okay, so I'll create a new JSON object. I'll put first name, last name, gender, and age into the JSON object, and I'll call two JSON string. What I like about this JSON simple library is it has great documentation. Not only does MK Young have great docs, you'll see Tutorials Point also has great docs for it. Simple JSON is used all over the place for Java. The JDK may have something pre-built in now, but this was definitely the library to use when they didn't have it in the JDK. So you can see I have all the docs here. It works on Windows, Linux, Mac. It talks about the pre-built functions. Look at all this great documentation. That's the type of library that you want to use. If you find some library online, it looks like it's from a sketchy website, it doesn't have any docs, nobody else is using it, I wouldn't download it. Okay, it could be a virus, it could be something that doesn't even work. Make sure it's a well-known library, make sure it has good documentation, make sure it has a good reputation, make sure other people are using it. You can see how many people download it. If Google is offering this library, then you know it's probably a good one. Okay, if you find some weird website, doesn't look like anybody using it, it feels weird, it looks weird, it has nobody's tested, nobody's talking about it, then don't use it. Okay, use the libraries from third parties that are trusted. If I go back to the code, you'll see here it doesn't know what JSON object is. Once I've successfully imported the library, I can click on this import and add it. And look at this. It's not in the JDK. JDK doesn't know what JSON object is. Earlier, when I was doing zip files, there was one in the JDK. But for this, it only recognizes the JSON simple JSON object. So I'm going to add the import for it, and you'll see the lines of code work. If I don't add this library, it wouldn't know what this is. And when you click the error, it would actually say, implement this class on your own. If you see that error, and then if you try to fix it, it says implement a JSON object class, then you know your import is wrong. You didn't import the library successfully. So I have two JSON string. Okay, I have two JSON string. And the only reason I need to do this is because I have my own custom object. If I go back to the docs, okay, I'll go back to MK Young. You'll see MK Young created it himself. It's right in the main. He puts it in there. He can even create a JSON array and have several objects in the array. And then he puts it to a file. Okay, then he puts it to a file. But for our code, we have our own object, person, and we want to serialize that to JSON. So not only do I need my JSON object, I need to grab the person object's information and put that in the JSON object. And you'll see I have another method, init from JSON string. So it takes a JSON string and then creates an object. So you'll see I'll clear out all the values. I'll make sure the JSON string does not equal null. I'll create a JSON object, and you'll see I have JSON value.parse. So I want to take this string and parse it and put it back to an object. If I right click on the error, now I've successfully added the import for the library. This import will work. JSON simple. So I'll add the import and it works just fine. I'm going to take the string, parse it back to an object. Now there could be an exception that occurs, and I may parse it and it may still be null. Maybe it doesn't work, or maybe there's nothing in the string. So I want to make sure the object does not equal null. If it's null, go ahead and return. If it's not null, I can grab the values. So you see I use the get or default. So I want to get first name if it's there. If it's not there, default to an empty string for the first name. Same for last name, JSON object, get or default, get the last name. It's key value pairs. So if I go back to the example, when I specify a key, it'll give me the value. So when I say give me name, it'll give me John. If I say give me age, it'll give me 31. If I say give me city, it'll give me New York. So when I come back to the coding example, when I say give me first name, it'll be whatever the user typed. When I say give me last name, it'll give me the value for last name. So you specify the key and it'll give you the value. Now, when I convert age, which is actually like this age here, 31, it'll convert it to a long. So you'll see here, I put it into an object. I make sure age is not equal to null. And I make sure the age object is an instance of long. If it's true, then I can put it into a long and then convert it back to an int. Okay, this is just how it is when I'm taking an integer out of a JSON object. Okay, you'll see some warnings here. It doesn't like me creating a new integer. New integer, I'm casting. I'm unboxing this integer. If you remember before the lecture, auto boxing and unboxing. Integer is a pre-built class. We don't need to use the new keyword with the integer class. So if I remove it, okay, I can also do this because integer can be set with the equal statement. You'll want to go back over that, right? The stuff we went over before the midterm. What's auto boxing? What's unboxing? What's the object in Turing? Okay, those are important concepts for the final exam as well. We got the library working. We got the toJSON string, which is taking an object and putting it into a string. And we have from string back to a JSON object, which takes a JSON string and puts it back into an object and puts it back not only to a JSON object, But back to our person object. This is perfect. Now we have the methods set up for serialization and deserialization. So right here, this will be our serialization method. We're taking an object and putting it to JSON. And this would be our deserialization. We're taking a string and putting it back into an object. Now that we have the method set up, we can actually implement the open and save. We're going to do that in the next video. Stick with Professor Wergeles, and we'll see you in the next video.